Brandon home, that's what we're saying. People around the world, oh, they're hoping, they're praying. You can see he don't belong inside. Interested in wrestling and Pokemon powers, wanting to get back to school, project due in 6th hour. He told them what they wanted, yeah, he lied. But he thought they were friends, they said they knew what had happened. He could not fathom it was him they were trapping. No attorney or parent by his side. A child's confession, so clearly coerced, making federal judges' skin crawl is one of the worst. His fate with you does abide. So Governor Evers, if you are listening, you can help restore faith back in the system. Or at least you can try. So bring Brandon home, well, that's what we're saying. People around the world, oh, we're hoping, we're praying. You can see he don't belong inside. Bring him home. Bring him home. Bring him home. Bring him home. Send Brandon home. Bring him home. Bring him home. Bring Brandon home. Bring Brandon home. Bring him home.
All right, folks, that's Stacy Seabrook. His new one, Bring Brendan Home, which he has dedicated specifically to Governor Evers. Governor Evers. I know if I say it wrong, I'm going to catch a whole load of crap. Sorry. Evers. And Stacy's great. He's one of our musicians on this case. For those of you who are interested, I will be having Brandon Maddox on tomorrow live, the other musician here, that we have going in the Avery Dassey cases. So he's going to be on tomorrow for those that are interested in that. All right, so I'm here today with the Hodd. Hello.
Good morning, sir.
How's it
Good
going,
evening
buddy?
from Australia. Yeah, pretty well.
Yeah?
Busy week in MAM world.
Busy couple weeks, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like funny, you get like these droughts where like nothing's happening and people are bored and maybe even start to pick at each other a little bit. And then all of a sudden you get this like flurry that just like comes in like a week or 2 week period. And anyway, it's funny how it happens. But so yeah, it's been interesting.
I wanted to firstly note I'm wearing my Crivets sweatshirt thing here.
Oh, let me get us on the screen.
Can you see it? Can you see it? Whoops.
Oh, there we go. There you go. Crivets, yes.
There we go.
Awesome.
Wisconsin.
Yep.
So, yeah. So, anyway, thank you for inviting me on. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Great to have you. I was almost going to have Mrs. Tracy Keogh, the lovely Tracy Keogh, on with us, but it wasn't in the cards today. But perhaps we'll get her on real soon. But we at least got one of my other favorite Aussies on here, folks. So anyway. So, all right. So I guess we'll start with Ken Kratz.
Yes.
Obviously, everybody knows he has been talking lately. He's been on Twitter. Him and Leah. They've been, talking a lot about his book, promoting his book because he's re-releasing it with 2 extra chapters. And he's been talking about how those chapters are going to talk about how he thinks Brendan Dassey should be released soon. Okay, this was all about 2 weeks ago this started, right? So this was him talking blah, 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 blah. Brendan should be released soon, blah, 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 blah. Why? Oh, because he's thinking he wants to be able to, he's hoping supporters might consider buying his book to read those extra 2 chapters. And he maybe figures if he talks about releasing Brendan, he might maybe get some of them to buy it, right? Okay. So skip forward to this week, motive. Right? What?
Yep. Maybe that's his motive, but, with Mr. Kratz, you can never be 100% sure what he's thinking.
Well, I go with what fits the facts, and that one I think this particular theory fits the facts the best. But skip forward to this week.
Yep.
Now, we have Laura Nyrider and Stephen Drizden have petitioned the governor of Wisconsin himself directly to grant Brendan clemency and in a form of a pardon because they based the petition on actual innocence. Okay, so now that that's happened, we're seeing Kratz do a complete 180 about face, and he's sending tweets to the governor saying, he did it, right? And things like that, like he's trying to block the efforts to get Brendan out sooner. So, and this is why I say this, because just last week, he was talking about how he thought that should happen. Now that it's like a possibility, and he thinks that Governor Evers might actually grant it, he's now panicked. And now he's trying to educate Governor Evers about why he shouldn't. It's like it shows that he was only talking about Brendan getting released because he figured it might help his book sales. And yeah, he's something else. And he's just you guys heard that video I uploaded.
It's very duplicitous.
Where we heard that clip of him actually saying about the coercion and about the manipulation. And you guys heard that? I played that the other day. I got that clip from David K. Sales' YouTube channel, by the way, folks. David K. Sales does a lot of phenomenal work with many wrongful convictions. But he had uploaded that. That's where I got that clip. I like to give credit where it's due, by the way. I don't know if I did in that video. But that's where that came from. I mean, that is quintessential Kratz. He's in that tweet to Governor Evers. He did it, right? And then he's in that next clip talking about how Brendan was coerced and it was manipulated and blah, 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 blah. The dude is all over the place. Whatever suits him at the time is the story he's going to tell.
That's absolutely right. I think also there's probably a little bit of ego on the line here and I think maybe even you mentioned that in a discussion I heard you speak. Maybe it was on the 80 More Things podcast that maybe Mr. Kratz is a little miffed that this matter jumped in front of him and that someone absolutely more appropriately, I should hasten to add, has taken this initiative, and maybe Mr. Kratz wanted to be seen as someone who, in his mind at least, influenced some reduction or something in Brendan's sentence.
Right.
That's where he was angling in his conversations over the last couple of weeks. Although I suspect, of course, as you said, that his primary motive would have been just to kick his book sales along. Right. That's what it would be.
Oh, well, to watch him do the about face when that possibility starts to look like it could become a reality, and to watch him do the flip that he's done, it kind of says that about you, Kratz. That's what your actions are suggesting about you right now, my friend. If you didn't know. Anyway. You're not actually my friend, but anyways.
The other element to this that is always, and I'm not the only one who comments on this, probably everyone does it, it's so kind of grubby that not only a former DA, but a disgraced DA, and now not even a lawyer, he's had his practicing license taken from him, who needs for some bizarre reason to perpetually inject himself into a case and and in these matters. I find that just bizarre. I guess those many others would probably say that's just the personality of Ken Kratz. But why he just doesn't sit back and say nothing, and his role in the case was a role as an employee of the government. It wasn't a role as a private citizen. So he's carrying on now is like, it's almost a privacy breach in a sense. He carries on about matters that were in his control as an employee of the government.
Right.
But overall, I mean, we know Mr. Kratz is, let's just say, an unusual gentleman. Or gentleman's probably not the correct word.
Right.
Unusual man, and so the normal kind of ways you expect people to behave are not going to be in evidence when you're dealing with him, as a rule.
Yeah, that's true. So that would then bring us to one of the other things that's happened here recently. That's pretty wild.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and we had to, and I had to do this video today, folks. Got Mark here, and your video went out, by the way, buddy. But got Mark here today to kind of recap, because man, there's just a lot of stuff that happened in this last 2 weeks, but in particular this last week. So this was kind of a way to kind of just sit down for a second and kind of go through everything that's happened here, because it's pretty wild. So the next thing is Len Kaczynski. Okay?
Oh my God.
What I mean, it's like in the midst of all this stuff, here we have Len Kaczynski getting found guilty for violating the restraining order against that court clerk there in Fox Crossing. And he violates it. There's 3 counts of violation, but a jury only gets him on 1 count. But that's enough for him to get a 6-month sentence. He's in a court of law by a jury, 6-month sentence, folks. Okay?
Yes.
He's doing 5 days. He's going to do 5 days. And they're already lining up public defender cases for him. Like, and it's like, for me...
Seriously, I mean, let's take this as a simple professional point. I'm a professional person in the area of finance, and I'm bound by rules, government rules, and my own ethical conduct rules. If I committed a criminal offence, certainly I don't mean, well, let's just say criminal offence, which typically is an offence that would result in a potential jail term, I'm immediately disbarred from holding a licence in what I'm doing, right? So how Len Kaczynski, how a judge can, effectively waive the sentence that's effective. Effectively what he's done is to waive the sentence, even though he has now a criminal record, and yet at the same time continue to be a public defender. I mean, it's so just ridiculous that someone who has quite a serious criminal record, not just a misdemeanor for, I don't know, drunk driving or something, but a serious criminal record, walks out of court one day and he's lining up his next 50 cases as a public defender.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just totally double standards.
And for me, it's like, wait, you just saw all this crap he went through. Okay, you guys managed to get him to dodge the stalking charges. Okay, that was a monumental feat, because the things he was doing to that poor woman, seriously, I guarantee you, if any one of us normal people had done that to that court clerk, we would all be in jail. We would all have been prosecuted and been in jail for all that creepy crap that he was doing.
Yes.
If we had done it. Okay? So he gets off on that. And then when he finally does get nailed for violating a restraining order, because he couldn't stay away from her, folks. They had to get a restraining order because he could not stay away from her. and he breaks that. Okay, here's my concern. Here's my concern moving forward. You're lining up 50 public defender cases for this man who has proven that he is quite clearly having a problem controlling his feelings towards women. Okay?
Yes.
So, I sure hope, state of Wisconsin, that we do not hear in the next 6 months to a year about how one of the clients, or say perhaps one of the female loved ones of one of the clients of Len Kaczynski, are suddenly coming out talking about how he made them feel inappropriate. Because guess what, Wisconsin? I will be all over that like flies on manure. And manure is exactly what this is with Len Kaczynski.
A great analogy. I mean, I question his actual mental competency to be in a judicial role on the public purse, defending people or whatever role they give him. There's nothing about him that would make me feel, as a taxpayer, confident that that man has the skills and the balance and the ethical balance to perform his role in a professional and independent way. We saw that enough way back, 13 years ago, and we've seen it in a very acute form in the last few years. And now this, it makes me question. I'm not at all a conspiracy theorist,
right.
So take this with a grain of salt. But it makes me question: was there some other motive for setting aside his sentence? Were they trying to take care of Mr. Kaczynski in light of other matters?
Well, I will say, just watching him speak in MAM2, the little clips they had of him when he was talking about his thoughts about Brendan's case or whatever, just those few little clips, I was honestly like, is he getting a little bit, screwy?
Yeah.
Because he just sounded a little bit off in MAM2.
And and that happens to people as they get older. From not everyone exactly the same.
Right.
That's why I'm saying it. That's not a criticism of him. It's a question of, is he competent to serve in these roles? Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's a bit like some of those interviews we've seen in recent years with Ken Peterson, and you're listening to him talk about matters back in 2005 and 1985, and you think, oh my God, this guy has no idea, right?
Right.
So I when I listen to Len Kaczynski, I just think there's no way in the world he should be performing those roles on the public purse.
Right.
And then he's been found guilty of a criminal offence, and they set the sentence aside, and then he's going back to work. I mean, by the way, how is he meant to keep away from the clerk? Well, how's the clerk meant to keep away from him?
Exactly.
Is he working in the same jurisdiction, legal jurisdiction still?
Yeah. Well, think about it this way.
It's totally disrespectful to the clerk,
right?
As far as I'm concerned.
And think about it this way, folks. If Stephen Avery wasn't in prison, okay? If he wasn't in prison and Stephen Avery had done even 1/3 of the things that Len Kaczynski did to this clerk, if Stephen Avery had done 1/3 of those things, I guarantee you they would have prosecuted him and Stephen Avery wouldn't have done 5 days. I guarantee you. It's about who you are and your stature that determines what kind of justice you get in Wisconsin. That's really the message that I see Wisconsin sending at the moment. I don't know that they mean to send that. I don't know that they actually set out to send that message, but because of their policies, that's the message they're sending at the moment. So.
And I don't see any... I mean, forgive me, I'm obviously not an American citizen, so I don't pretend to know all the machinations of what goes on there, but in Australia, we have a body called the Independent Commission Against Corruption. It's a statutory body that's set up under law, and it investigates without fear or favour these sorts of, or behaviours, let's say, that are against the public interest. I don't see any inkling of any body or any organisation that does anything at all to overview in a meaningful way these sorts of activities. I see people getting angry about them, and I see people wishing that certain people would do certain things about them, but I don't know whether such an oversight body exists in Wisconsin or perhaps in other states in the United States, but the law enforcement have this unfettered disrespect for accountability, and we see that both in issues of prosecutorial immunity and other related matters, and they seem to think, and often do, get away with anything that they like. So there's the law, and then there's a law according to, the whim of the sheriff, or the whim of the prosecutor, or the whim of the Attorney General, whoever's got a particular bent towards something at a given point in time. The law doesn't seem to have its own standing. In other words, it doesn't seem to stand just on its independent merits.
Right. Right. So there's that. Len Kaczynski. Okay. Because we all know how he did what he did to Brendan. That was fine. The state of Wisconsin didn't see any problem with that. He goes on. He becomes a judge, So it's this, for me right now, this news with Len Kaczynski, and another reason why I wanted to do this video and go over all these things that have happened this last week, because I didn't want this to get forgotten in the, stampede of everything that's happening, because I believe this Len Kaczynski thing really shows the culture of corruption there. The way that it's ingrained, it's just part of the landscape, so to speak. And so I wanted to make sure we didn't forget about this, that it didn't get trampled.
And just to add to that story, or that analysis, Len Kaczynski's appointment of Michael O'Kelly as his investigator, and his behaviour, that is Michael O'Kelly's behaviour, is just yet another example of the ills of the system. I mean, Michael O'Kelly was a disgrace, an absolute disgrace to humanity, let alone his profession as an investigator.
Yeah. The
things that he wrote in emails about the Avery family and all that sort of garbage he went on with. The loaded question he put before Brendan, are you sorry or not sorry for what you did to Teresa Halbach?
Right.
That's like the question, have you stopped beating your wife, right? It's loaded. Any answer that you give is not a good answer, and doesn't necessarily reflect what really happened. And how an investigator can write up a question and give that and think that's okay, let alone the fact that, he's supposed to be on Brendan's side, is just mind-boggling.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Kaczynski is probably the one. Erekose, Kaczynski, and his buddy, Mr. O'Kelly, are probably the ones that in many ways rile me the most about this whole matter.
I started watching... I started actually watching Brendan Dassey, A True Story of a False Confession yesterday, and I haven't finished it yet, but I love that video, folks. If you haven't checked it out, it's on YouTube. Check it out. Brendan Dassey, A True Story of a False Confession. Anyway, at the beginning of that, there's a point where Stephen Drizzen is explaining how Robert Dvorak tracked Michael O'Kelly down before they ever got any of the stuff that O'Kelly had. All that interview with Brendan that he did with Brendan, they didn't have that yet. Okay? They didn't get that until Robert Dvorak tracked him down to like some conference he was giving in Ohio or somewhere. And so Robert Dvorak flew there, attended the conference, listened to him speak, And as soon as Michael O'Kelly was done speaking, he walked up and said, "Here you go, sir. Here's the subpoena." And he had to come back to Wisconsin with all of his tapes and paperwork and everything that he had regarding Brendan Dassey. And it's a great story, the way that Drizzen tells it, because it's like Robert Dvorak is going and dragging him, or tracking him down and dragging him back to Wisconsin to answer. It's awesome. I love it. So that's a great part. So those of you who haven't checked out Brendan Dassey, True Story of a False Confession, it's on YouTube. It's great. So, all right. Yeah. Now, that will bring us to our next subject. And that is the big news of the moment. The fact that Knight Rider and Drizzen have filed for clemency for Brendan Dassey. And how huge is that?
Amazing. I mean, it's huge news. It's not amazing that Stephen Drizzen and Laura Knight Rider have done it, because they're such wonderful advocates for the wrongfully convicted. So it doesn't surprise me in terms of their caliber, but it's a massive piece of news. And the thing I like about it the most is, well, there are two things and I like about it, and that is it's generated such a broad reach of interest in the matter because of what it's doing, and right across the United States, right across, and dragged in a lot more people to the cause of wrongful convictions, and in particular to Brendan, of course. So that's one thing I like about it, that it's had this effect of widening or rekindling the interest in the wrongful convictions, and particularly of Brendan. But secondly, it's put a very specific obligation on Governor Evers. Is it Evers or Evers? I don't want to get that right.
Yeah, it's Evers.
On Governor. Okay, Governor Evers to respond, right? Because he's been there a year. We've been kind of, wondering what he's going to be like as a new governor and so on, or nearly a year, I should say. So it's really put something directly on his desk to deal with. And I think that particular focus is a focus we haven't had the benefit of for a long time. And even though it's a request for a pardon or the reduction in the sentence for time served and so on, it's almost like a pseudo, not a trial, but you know what I mean? It's a determination. Someone's going to make a determination about Brendan Dassey.
Yeah.
And it's not just a bunch of good people hoping for someone they like to get out of prison. This is a petition that's full of amazing evidence, including all the
amicus brief type people. Which is already over 10,000, by the way. 10,000 people have signed the petition and sent a message to Governor Evers.
Yeah.
In that short of a time span. I mean, that's crazy.
There's some weighty intellectual people, including people like Seth Waxman, making contributions to this. Someone who's, given, I think he's given more been before the Supreme Court of the United States more than anybody. So it's weighty people behind this. This is not people just who are friends of Brendan, family and close friends. This is people who have 100% interest in having a well-structured and well-applied justice system in the United States. So Governor Evers will have before him a lot to consider, and I'm sure he'll consider it well. But I just think it's great that has happened, and if there isn't a more deserving case for the authority vested in Mr. Evers to give such a ruling, I can't think of a more deserving case than Brendan Dassey, particularly since his confession, his so-called confession, is widely regarded as being involuntary, and secondly, there's no other evidence that supports the claims that confession would have you believe. And so, yeah, I think it's wonderful, and I'm not sure how long it takes them to consider the matter, but my guess is it won't take a long time. That'd be my guess, but I have no idea.
I know Tracy Strensey said that usually if they're going to deny it, they do it quickly. And the reason why is because they don't want their political opponents and stuff to even start to think they're considering it just because of how volatile it can be politically. So that's some of the concerns that are swirling around here, folks. Will Governor Evers be inclined to grant clemency? I mean, and that's a fairly big concern. But like, I just wanted to point that out that Tracy said most likely if it's going to get denied, it gets usually done quickly. Just in history, just like looking at the past, it usually gets done quickly for those reasons. So,
yeah. It's not the sort of issue as a governor whose mind has to be focused on many things that you want constantly rattling around there. I mean, it's an important matter. It does deserve his careful consideration, but it's certainly not something you want to have just floating around. I must get around to that sort of thing. It's, I think, a lot of who he is as an educator and as a governor and a leader of Wisconsin will be measured by how he deals with this matter.
Yeah.
It'll be an important test for him as a leader as to how he deals with it. Now, I'm not saying he has to deal with it in the positive, which ideally that's what us would like, or we all would like. But how he deals with it, even if he was to say no, will be an extremely important test of his governorship.
Yeah, certainly. Now, I mean, there's also the consideration that he may feel inclined to help Brendan, but he may not feel like this is the time at the beginning of his term. So there's also that side of it.
Perhaps.
It's hard to say which way he might go. Especially when he's got the likes of King Kratz over on Twitter going, he did it, right? Jesus Christ, shut the hell up.
If I was sitting in Mr. Evers' office and I was allowed to give him one piece of information that I would like him to consider regarding this matter, and that is, I would say to him, Mr. Evers, imagine Brendan Dassey is your own son. That is, he's a 16-year-old boy with, at the time, with intellectual disabilities or limitations, probably is more the proper description.
And diagnosed speech-language pathology issues. Diagnosed. Correct.
Yeah. Who was repeatedly interviewed by experienced police officers with at no time did he have a lawyer or a responsible person present or a parent. Is that the way, Mr. Evers, you want justice to be dished up to your son if he was in a similar circumstance?
Right.
Would you want your son to be in that same circumstance that Brendan Dassey found himself in?
Right. However,
that would be my primary question to him.
So he'd probably get the Len Kaczynski treatment anyway, but, sorry.
So I think it's important for politicians. It's important for politicians to understand it from, as if put themselves in the shoes of Brendan Dassey or Brendan Dassey's family, if I can put it that way.
Right.
And say, did Brendan get dispensed with the level of care and control and justice that was always intended in the Constitution of the United States? Did he get that?
Right.
Okay.
No, yeah,
that,
right.
If if there's any doubt about that, and you don't have to rely on my advice, Mr. Evers, you go and listen and read all the documentation that's been given to you by the Centre for Wrongful Convictions of Youth, and all the supporting documentation from people such as Seth Waxman, and understand that law enforcement agencies use Brendan's interrogation as an example of what not to do these days.
Yes.
And also, Mr. Evers, remember that the level of confessions of all the people that get exonerated, and if we're talking about 18-year-olds and younger and those with limitations, 80% of those people give false confessions. So don't believe the words of one of your current Assistant Attorney Generals, Mr. Fallon, when he says innocent people don't confess, right? Because that's just not true. So, so Mr. Evers, You're new in this role. You're not new in terms of your experience as an educator. Just sit back and look what's happened here, and make a wrong right, and not just for Brendan Dassey, but for the system as a whole. That's the way I look at it, and that's how I think.
Yeah.
I hope he looks at it as well.
Right. Yep. Somebody was asking here in the chat earlier about, real quickly, I want to go over this real quick because somebody asked about what's the next step for Brendan if he is not able to get clemency from Governor Evers. Okay, so the options Brendan has left to him at that point is he can then do exactly what Stephen's doing right now. Brendan can still file his own 97-406, which is a motion for post-conviction relief, just like Stephen did originally, the whole 1,000-page thing that Stephen filed back in 2017. Yeah, 2017. Yeah. So, or Zellner filed it. So he can still file one of those. And he can still do that himself. And he can try to introduce some new evidence or, whatever it is. So he still has that way. He still has that route to go down. Now, I think Laura Nyrider and Stephen Drizzen are trying this first because if it works, it's kind of immediate and they can get Brendan out quickly. I think they decided to try this before a 97-406 because if they want to go through a 97-406, it's going to be a long, drawn-out fight with the state fighting it tooth and nail the entire way, and so it might have just taken a long time. So maybe they decided to try this option first to try to get Brendan out and home quicker and more expediently. So that may be why they tried this option first.
Yes, I mean, the primary consideration here has to be Brendan's welfare. That has to always be the primary consideration. And anything that gets Brendan out and home faster, or as fast as can be possible, should be pursued. And that's why what they're doing is so commendable. As you say, or in response to the question, there are other options for Brendan if it was refused. And also including, of course, the implications in Stephen's matter, because the narrative of the state is that Stephen and Brendan acted together here. So what goes on in Stephen's case will unquestionably have influence in Brendan's matter and may give rise not only to his direct release from there, but also newly discovered evidence that Brendan can then use. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. So, and that's one thing I'm thinking too is that Laura Nyrider and Stephen Drizzen may be waiting, to use the 97-406 as like a kind of their last option, because by doing that, by making it their last option and trying pretty much everything else first, by the time they finally get to that option, if it becomes necessary, they are going to be able to look and just cherry pick the best bits that help them from what's been created in Zellner's wake. Because Zellner's running through this like a buzzsaw going, yeah, we're cutting out this crap, this cancer's got to go, she's just like, and so, it's just flying. So they can just kind of come through and pick up what they feel can help Brendan at that point after Zellner's thrown up all this dust and exposed all of these things that can help them. So I think they're just waiting because it actually is just like advantageous for them at this point in time to wait before they do a 97-406 for Brendan. And like I said, meantime, this thing could work and it could get Brendan out and home quicker than a 97-406 could.
Absolutely. And one of the kind of odd things in Brendan's case, because there's no other evidence against Brendan other than his confession,
right.
He doesn't have the obvious pile of things to investigate that Kathleen Zellner does for Stephen. So that doesn't mean there aren't newly discoverable items to be found, but there isn't the litany of issues that characterise Stephen's case that Kathleen Zellner is looking at. Brendan doesn't have those,
right?
Because he didn't. There was no evidence against him other than his confession. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a little bizarre twist for him because of that fact.
Lorraine Bell, I'm sorry, Captain Crunch there, he's referring to Sharon Sunshine. She's a Glaswegian. Sorry, I just needed to clear that up in the chat there real quick. Okay, so I hear. So you're enjoying mine and Sharon's little back and forth with We Scottish Lass, right?
I am. Yes, very much so.
Oh, right,
She's a funny girl. She's a funny girl, Sharon.
Sharon.
Very, very clever and very enjoyable.
Yeah,
So,
she's fun.
in fact, I know you've said this a lot in over the whatever, but the number of people, supporters, that are making significant contributions to the knowledge sharing is just breathtaking. Mm-hmm. Be it through video, be it through other music, be it through their commitment to posting things on be it Twitter or Facebook pages. It's a wonderful, wonderful community to belong to, and I feel very fortunate that I'm happen to be connected to it all.
Do you think Evers wait to KZ files first and sees what's okay. I don't know about that. So somebody's asking basically, do you or I guess think that Evers will wait until KZ files with the Court of Appeals to get kind of a barometer on maybe which way the Court of Appeals might go, or at least to see those arguments? I don't know. I don't know that it would really matter.
I don't think it matters either.
Yeah. Because
this is not an argument about the fact of the matter. This is an argument about the way, about the humanitarian aspects, but also mostly about the way in which Brendan was treated. Mm-hmm. That's what the primary argument is: the way in which Brendan was treated. Kathleen Zellner's submission, I would suspect, is mostly about the factual aspects of the case and either proving or disproving them, and the behaviour of the state in terms of their duty or their failure to fulfil their duty of care. I don't see that as being connected to the essence of this clemency petition.
Right.
But okay. I don't really know. I guess I'm just guessing, but I don't really see Mr. Evers as this hot political potato like his predecessor was.
Right.
I get the impression that he's just his own man. He's not driven by anything other than what he thinks is in the best interest of.
Yeah, I think coming from a background in education, he's more interested in the really generally the common good and that sort of
that's
stuff.
The impression I get. I mean, maybe someone who knows him a lot better than I do can offer a view about that, but that's the feeling I get. About the way he conducts himself as governor.
So, in reference to the question about Josh Call commenting, no, I don't expect we'll hear Josh Call saying much about this. I'm sure he'll probably do just like Mommy and never ever speak about the Avery case publicly. I think there's only one time where they have a clip of Peg Lautenschlager talking about the Avery case. So I imagine, just like Mommy, he will probably not say much. He'll sign whatever paperwork he has to sign, or documents he has to sign for arguments, going to courts and all that. He'll sign wherever he has to sign, but I doubt we'll see him really commenting seriously himself on the Avery Dassey cases.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, he has said that, he believes that the governor will give it his fair consideration. I haven't heard him say anything more than that. But he really shouldn't say anything, because this is a petition for clemency from the governor. If you've got the Attorney General and other people weighing in on the merits in a public forum, it's like conducting a court case, right? Mm-hmm. This should be for the personal consideration of Governor Evers. Now, that's not to say he won't seek some advice about detail, but they shouldn't be trying to influence him at all. Otherwise, it's not a clemency petition. It's a a sided thing. Someone trying to push their view. They didn't make the petition to the Attorney General or to whomever. They made it to the Governor, to him personally. It's a personal thing.
Yeah. Yep. So that is obviously the big news about Brendan and his bid for clemency. And that will bring us to the last bit of big news that we've had here in the last week, or at least it caused enough waves for everybody to be paying attention somewhat. And that is Sean Reck tendering a confession from Joseph Evans, who attempted to admit to committing the Teresa Halbach murder and all those sorts of things. And, well, it's quite ridiculous, and you can pretty much, put it with the manure, that is Len Kaczynski getting let off for what he did. But anyway, but this guy is interesting because he's talking a lot about connections and contact with law enforcement. And I do find that intriguing. Not sure how much there is to it yet, but I do find it intriguing.
Yes, I listened fully to Mr. Reck's interview with
Chris Hansen.
Boo. And I was sort of I had a discussion with Paul Capaldi about this earlier in the week. I was sort of hoping to kind of get a view from him that he'd considered everything, because one of the things the producers of Making a Murderer 1 and 2 were criticised for, not my opinion by the way, that they were biased in one way or the other, in favour of, if you like, the defence. But Mr. Reck, everything he said to Chris was exactly that, a selective telling of information that both either or showed what a poor grasp of the facts of the matter he had, or that he was trying he would deliberately, he had to be deliberate, or he had to be, excuse me saying, a little stupid about the facts of the matter, because he would leave such key important things out, both in terms of the earlier facts of the matter in MAM1 and almost no mention of matters in MAM2. I said to Paul at the time, it just sounded like I was listening to Ken Kratz tell a story.
Right.
And I rapidly became very disappointed that that was what we were being dished up, and how he spoke to the interviewer, who by the way, as it turned out, he had worked with Mr. Reck on a number of films in the past. And so I just thought I totally lost respect for what I had hoped would be a thoroughly independent and balanced view under that documentary. I mean, I haven't seen it, of course, but if the interview that he had with Mr. Hansen was anything to go by, then it was really just a slanted approach to matters. And I can only think the reason for that is because he needed to have some edge on his documentary, because if he tells the story in the way it should be told, he's not the first one to tell it, right? We already know all the balance of issues, plus and minus.
Yeah.
So it seemed to me like he was trying to create an edge to his documentary, and in the hope that it would get picked up and people would be interested in watching it. That's my
I think
view.
he was trying to create interest, and I think that's what a big part of this was.
Interest in not in the truth. I don't think he was trying to create interest in the truth. He was trying to create a media moment, and that, in fact, I mean, in fairness to him, he was only being interviewed for a short period of time, so it's not like he could tell the whole story.
Right.
But he made statements about things that just like he talked about Lenk and Colburn and the fact that the truthers had been really harsh on them and they'd suffered for their families had suffered and had to change their names and leave town or whatever the things he was saying, but totally didn't bother to mention anything about them being in total conflict as in the case, or that for example that Andrew Colburn had taken that call regarding Gregory Allen back in 1995, and it was like they were just innocent people and were just badly treated by everybody.
Right.
So there were things like that. So if you didn't understand the case well and you listened to what he had to say, and he wasn't trying in any way to give balance to his views, and he just made out that people like ourselves were part of I don't know whether these his words, but were like a part of a cult or a fan club. So I just was disappointed. I don't mind, of course I don't mind people having a different view to my own, but I want people to have arguable positions. They shouldn't just be spurting rubbish without having an arguable position.
I'll tell you what, he does seem kind of not fully up to date with the facts, and so
he's not.
I do feel like there are certain folks out there right now that are providing the means for an education for him, and so hopefully that will manifest in the documentary.
Yeah.
So.
But there was even a simple little point. At some point in the interview, the conversation went to the issue of the civil case, Stephen Avery civil case, back in 2003 when it was on. But he was referring to that as some activity that was somehow took away from fairness towards the prosecutor Dennis Vogel and also the then Sheriff Kasurik, and totally forgot to mention, or didn't know to mention, that the insurance companies had stepped away from underwriting those legal claims because of what was clearly culpable behaviour. Mm-hmm. So he wouldn't bring to the table the motives or reasons behind lots of things that gave people on we can call ourselves the truthers side, gave us motive to be upset about what went on here. He wouldn't bring those issues to the table. I think mostly because he didn't really know about them. He was just relying on some simplistic one-liners from the other side, right, to promote a documentary. Because, as I say, if he actually was truly fair and had a balanced view, we already know that story. That's not a new story. That's already been done and continues to be done. So, I know...
To be fair to Sean Reck, though, and unlike Chris Hansen, who said he thought Kratz was a straight shooter... Dude, what? Did you just say that? No. Oh, my God. I couldn't believe it when he said that. But at least Sean Reck was like, hey, Chris, not everything that Kratz says fact checks. I mean... That's a pretty candidly honest statement right there to counter, Chris Hansen saying he thought Kratz was a straight shooter. It's like, you know what that tells me, Chris Hansen? That tells me that you don't fact check a thing that Ken Kratz says. So now, if I ever hear you, Chris Hansen, speak about Ken Kratz or making a murderer in the future, I will just go ahead and assume you haven't done your homework. So that's what you have created for yourself. Anyways.
Yeah. I mean, the Making a Murderer or the Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey cases are complicated cases. There's lots of layers of different issues going on here, and sometimes the very sad death of Teresa Halbach can sometimes momentarily be forgotten, right? But there are all these different layers, and to put yourself into a position of being an expert or purporting to be an expert, you need to know your stuff. right? You do really need to know your stuff.
Yeah.
Or at least have the
Yeah.
caveat to say, this is the best part I know. I probably don't know everything, but this
Or
is
maybe
what I
do a
know,
little
right?
fact checking before you put in your support behind a guy who's believed to have forced himself on somebody who was a victim of domestic violence and stuff, and threatened that he wouldn't prosecute her case if she didn't do what he wanted. When you've got somebody like that, maybe you don't just go throwing your support behind that person until you've fact checked a few of the things that they've said. Just a
Yes.
little advice, Chris.
Yes. So anyway. Look, I'm being repetitive, but I was very disappointed into that
Absolutely.
interview.
So I think.
Could I just say one other?
Yeah.
Could I say one other thing?
Go ahead.
Just to go back to the last matter we were discussing and regarding Brendan's petition for clemency. It's people might think this is trivial, but I think it's just amazing and fantastic that we've got quite a well-known celebrity figure in Kim Kardashian supporting what Brendan's doing. Someone might say that who's Kim Kardashian in terms of anything to do with this, but she does have 62 million followers on Twitter. That's a sizable following. And with due fairness to her, she is studying a law degree at the moment, and she has genuinely been making vesting interest in these sort of wrongful conviction type matters. So for her to step up to the plate, all credit to her, and I think that says a lot about the wider level of support for Brendan's plight.
Yeah, absolutely. She has a lot of, she has a big fan base, and so by her putting the message out, she creates that awareness amongst a lot of people. So I'm always for creating that awareness. But I will honestly say, and I know there's probably a lot of people out there, for those of us that have been here and in the trenches and digging up everything for 3 years, there's an aspect of watching Kim kind of jump on the bandwagon here that for people that have been here and in the trenches for 3 years, it kind of rubs us a little bit in an odd way. But like I said, because she has so many supporters and followers, it creates the amount of awareness that she creates by tweeting about it is a significant thing, and so I'm all for it. But I did want to acknowledge that, because those of us who have been in the trenches for 3 years, we can get a little bit I don't know, buggy when somebody kind of like jumps in and starts capitalizing on big news in this case. But like I said, with Kim, and for the reasons like Marcus stated, she's going to get her law degree. There's a lot of reasons why I can say, okay, yeah, I'm good with Kim on this. But I did want to bring up that aspect of it because I know there are people out there that understand exactly what I'm talking about right now.
Yeah, but the only thing I would say about that is that, and I'm sure this is true anyway for everyone, we're in the trenches because we believe in justice. We're not in the trenches for any particular personal fame or glory, because there's none of that for us other than our sense of feeling like we've done the best we can.
Yes.
Okay, people like Kim Kardashian and others are well-known people, but it's that notoriety that gives them that coverage, right? And so I look, I don't watch stuff that Kim is involved in, although I have seen some of her shows. I don't watch her stuff, but I do admire the fact that not just on Brendan's case, she is taking an active interest in law matters, and she was also responsible in speaking to Donald Trump and getting that lady out of prison who'd been there for 21 years for a non-violent drug offence, and she'd been in prison 21 years. I mean, seriously, good on her.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, that's great. And look, it's like I said, she's putting one foot in front of the other, moving towards a law degree, like you're talking about, and everything. So it's like, yeah, I can see her taking an interest in this and caring about this, and I'm good with it. It's just And I'm not going to say it again, but for the reasons like I was just stating, I know there's a community of people out there that don't enjoy seeing people capitalize for frivolous reasons. I just wanted to state for the record that I don't believe that Kim's doing this for frivolous reasons. I believe Kim actually gives a crap about what's going on here, and isn't just trying to capitalize on the media sensation. So that's mainly what I'm saying. But I wanted to acknowledge those people out there, the salty dogs out there that have been in this for the last 3.5 years from pretty much day one, and acknowledge them that some of them are still having a little trouble with Kim. So anyways.
Yeah, there are more people in the boat rowing, the better, I say.
Yeah, there we go.
And,
and like I said, her 62 million followers helps create a lot more awareness for Brendan, so I'm on board with it. I'm good with it. So, all right. Yeah. Having established that, because somebody was getting on my case here, they just thought I was such a jerk. I am not saying anything bad about Kim. She's doing a great job. All right. That is about all of the things that have happened. I think we've gotten through them. It's quite a bit there.
It's been quite a busy month of September.
Yeah.
And early October, including it seems like old news now. I remember at the beginning, I think it was the beginning of the month, with the reward thing from Zellner, and yeah, I guess Joseph Evans guy, his matter arose out of that. So, and this next week on the 14th, I think it is. So that's next, not the Monday coming, the one after is the filing date for Kathleen Zellner and Stephen's case. So, there'll be plenty to talk about in the next week as well.
Yep. And I just want to say this one more time because of what I see in the chat. I want to let everybody know I think what Kim is doing is great, because I can't believe how many people are misunderstanding in the chat here. I am only talking about a small community of people out there who haven't warmed up to her yet. Hopefully they will. Okay? All right, just to address that in the chat. So, that's about... It kind of bugs me when people aren't getting what I was saying. So, anyways, no, I do think she's doing a great job. So, everybody get out there and retweet Kim, do all those things, because that's what's going to help us reach more people. That's the whole point. I uploaded the video last night about going down to Sunset Strip with the banner that Mark had made in Australia, and we're going to take that thing and we're going to go get pictures with it, and we're going to have some fun with it, and we're going to have a supporter gathering hopefully, and get together and have some camaraderie just among supporters. Go somewhere and eat afterwards after doing some of these fun things. The whole idea is to create more, camaraderie and more, connections between supporters and the people supporting Brendan and Stephen. And, obviously I'm doing what I'm doing here in Southern California, but, we've got people all over, the country. We had Shaz who did her own rally over in Philadelphia this year, along with the Manitowoc rally that was going on. And so there's people around, and there's pockets of people that can get together and show support for Stephen and Brendan. So let's start getting those pockets of people together, and let's start showing some support for Stephen and Brendan. Because guess what? I am focused on what's important, and I am focused on what is, what we need to be doing here, and the awareness that we should all be creating. And so therefore I'm doing it. So that's where we're at. Those of you who are interested, check out the video I did last night. And yes, go ahead.
Just to encourage everyone to sign the petition,
yep.
Supporting Brendan with Governor Evers. That's a great, important way that you can demonstrate your support, and to send it around to your friends, and ask them to consider signing it as well.
Yes, absolutely. So and that was on the. It's often at the bottom of the page when you go to the Wrongful Conviction podcast, where you hear Laura Nyrider and Brendan in the interview there. Usually it's down at the bottom underneath that, and it allows you to send the message. It allows you to sign the petition, to where you're basically sending a message, and you get to actually send a small, limited kind of comment along
Yes.
with your signature to Governor Evers. So, like I said, there's already been over 10,000. I mean, this just started 2 days ago, and we're like, and Laura Nyrider said they're already around 10,000. So, I mean, if we keep that growing, I mean, that's making a big noise for Brendan. That's what I mean about
Indeed.
creating awareness. That's what I mean about, I mean, this is what needs to be done, and these are the things that we're supposed to be doing. So, and these are the things that help. So, all right.
Indeed. It's 2 a.m. here in Australia.
Yeah, have we been talking that long?
Well, nearly 2 a.m. But it's even worse than that, because here we're switching to daylight saving tonight, so it's actually 3 a.m. now.
Oh, dude, you're springing forward. Oh,
Woohoo!
actually, well, is it spring for you because you're in the southern
spring.
hemisphere?
Correct.
Okay, so you are springing forward. It's all it's fall for us here, so we'll be falling back, right? Anyway.
Correct.
So.
Correct. Oh, and by the way, just as a little aside, I've got my Abbey Road coffee cup
nice.
here to keep me awake while I was on this chat with you. So I can see your guys in the background there. So, yeah.
Yep, awesome. That's a cool cut. I like it. Mark's got the cool Beatles sign behind him there. I like it.
Help. That's there deliberately.
I need somebody help, not just anybody. All right, guys. So that was the little recap. Last couple weeks, big news. Just a quick going over it. Ken Kratz can't shut his gob. He's just all over the damn place. Got Len Kaczynski, who was sentenced to 6 months for violating a restraining order. He's only going to do 5 days, and they're already lining up more victims for him. More public defender cases for him. And and then we got Brendan's bid for clemency filed by Nyrider and Drizzen, and the great noise that's making, including the support of Kim Kardashian, who is also helping to create more awareness around this. And then ultimately there is the whole thing that happened with Sean Reck and the prisoner Joseph Evans, who murdered his wife back in, I think, 2009 or something like that. So he's a murderer. He's a murderer. He's in prison now, and he confessed to killing Teresa Halbach, which turned out most anybody that has researched this case believes is completely bogus and is completely worthless. But there's some interesting chatter that's coming out of it. So
interesting to see the results of the police investigation into that confession.
True, to see what they find. Yeah. Because I wonder if this guy had some connections. I wonder if he might have been a confidential informant for law enforcement prior to killing his wife. I actually wonder if that might have been a case.
Yes.
And so
there'll be another story for that to be told. Rest assured. So.
Right. Yeah. So okay, that's all the main points. Thank you for being here today, Mr. Hodd. It's been a pleasure, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Kose. A pleasure for me too. And thank you to everyone on the chat and taking the time to listen in and ask questions.
Yep. And thank you all for being here. It's been a pleasure as always. And like I said, just wanted to recap these things because, oh my God, there was so much happening this week. Wouldn't want any of it to fall through the cracks. So, if you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you. I got Mark doing caricatures of me over here.